NHL regular season recap night 157, a whole bunch of games tonight. The first one, actually this afternoon, the Flyers taking on the Bruins, and it was a pretty good one. Travis Konechny scoring the first goal of the game in the second period with about a minute and some change to go, and then in the third, Brazo, Konechny with his second, Danton Heinen and Ty Forrester with the game winner with just 90 seconds to play. It's a 3-2 victory here for Philly. Sam Ersson, 18 of 20 for a .900, Linus Ullmark, 26 of 29 for an .897, neither goalie overly busy, but Ersson gets the job done. It's a huge 2 points for Philly. They're again looking to stay alive in their playoff race. The Bruins, of course, maintaining the first spot in the Atlantic Division due to Florida's outcome tonight. It's a 3-2 win here for Philadelphia. The Islanders hosting the Jets, and this one ended up being kind of a surprise pounding from the Islanders. Clutterbuck scoring twice in the first to open things up in the first 9 minutes. Vlad Nemestikov made it a 2-1 game a few minutes later, but Kyle Palmieri made it 3-1 Islanders before the period ended. And then in the second, it's all Islanders. Once again, Hudson Fasching, Matt Barzal, and Anders Lee all scoring. The Islanders 21 shots in the second period. Mason Appleton and Cole Perfetti would both score in the third, but that only made the game 6-3. Not Connor Hellebuck's finest night. He goes 21 for 26 for an .808 save percentage. Meanwhile, Semyon Varlamov getting the start tonight, 32 of 35 for a .914. A very solid outing from him, and similarly, a very big 2 points for the Islanders as they look to chase down Philadelphia. 6-3 is the final. The Blues visiting Minnesota, one of, if not the biggest games on the schedule today. Just 1 point separating these two teams headed into the game, and of course the Blues had the lead in that. And this was a very entertaining back-and-forth playoff atmosphere game. Jake Neighbors, the first goal here in the first period to make it 1-0 Blues. In the second, the Wild take over. Johansson, Rossi, Kyrou, and Rossi with his second all scoring. So 3-2 Wild after two, but Jordan Kyrou completes a hat-trick effort in the third to make it a 4-3 game. Brock Faber would score with just 5 minutes to go to make it a 4-4 game, and then in the overtime, Brandon Saad scores the game winner. Jordan Binnington was the much better of the two goalies today, 30 of 34 for an .882, while Marc-Andre Fleury struggled quite a bit, 22 of 27 for an .815, but the MVP of this game for sure goes to Jordan Kyrou. It's a big 2 points for St. Louis. They pull 2 ahead of Minnesota now because the game went to OT, but as we'll discuss in a bit, they're still a few points behind Vegas, 4 to be exact, and Vegas has the game in hand over these guys, so we'll see if they're able to make that run to catch up to them, but for now, they'll take the extra point over Minnesota. 5-4 in overtime is the final. The Red Wings visiting the Predators in a very big game for both teams, but especially for Detroit in a game that you'd expect to see some flair, some scoring. Didn't have too much of that. It had some flair, but not so many goals. The only goal goes to Philip Forsberg, who also had a fight with Mo Seider, of all people. Kind of a surprising duel there, but Philip Forsberg's goal coming with just over 5 minutes to play in the third period. And again, the only goal of the game, his 39th of the year. Both goalies, of course, very strong in this one. Lyon, 31 of 32 for a .969. Very nice. UC Saros, 22 of 22 for the shutout effort. The 2 points. They're now 17 games in a row with at least a point. 15-0-2 over that span are the Preds. An incredible run, and they continue it with a 1-0 victory here over Detroit. The Leafs taking on the Oilers on a Hockey Night in Canada matchup, and the Leafs looked very good through the first 2 periods especially. Bobby McMann and William Nylander scoring in the first. Pontus Holmberg with 2 in the second, and Bobby McMann with his second of the game, all in the second period as well. And then, of course, Leafs fans probably got a little nervous in the third here. Zach Hyman and Corey Perry both scoring in the first 8.5 minutes. Leon Draisaitl scoring to make it 5-3 with about 3.5 to go, but Austin Matthews nets the empty netter, his 58th of the year, and it's a 6-3 final for Toronto. Ilya Samsonov, who left this game momentarily, 31 of 34 for a .912. Stuart Skinner, not his greatest work, 18 of 23 for a .783. A little bit of a bump in the road here for the Oilers. For the Leafs, of course, a very strong outing. Not really out shooting Edmonton, but, capitalizing on the chances they got, of course, thanks to a kind of subpar performance from the opposing goalie. Both teams are going to be, ho-hum with this game. It's not a great defensive effort from the Leafs. It's, of course, not a great offensive effort from the Oilers. Nonetheless, the Leafs get it done 6-3 as they continue to look to potentially catch the Florida Panthers in that race in the Atlantic. The Senators visiting the Jersey Devils, and this game was a weird one. I was at this one again in person. Mateo Joseph, the only goal scorer in the first off of a brutal turnover to make it 1-0 Sens. The Devils came out flying in the second. Jesper Bratt and Tomas Nosek both scoring in the first minute of the second period, but then Ridley Gregg, Alex Cruikshank, I think, and Thomas Chabot all scoring before the halfway point of the period. and it's suddenly 4-2 Senators. Drake Batherson would add another in the third to make it 5-2. Just a really uninspiring performance from New Jersey. Jake Allen was also not all that great. 20 of 25 for an 800, while Jonas Korpisalo only faced 20 shots, stops 18 of them for a 900 save percentage. This Devils team just looks like they've kind of given up, to be honest. I know their math is not exactly great as far as their odds to make the playoffs, but they just don't look like they're even interested in trying to push for it. As a result, tonight they lose 5-2 to a not-so-great Senators team. The Rangers taking on the Panthers, and this one looked good for the Panthers early on. Kachuk scoring the only goal in the first, and Eetu Luostarinen scoring just 20 seconds into the second, but Fox and Panarin would tie it about 2 minutes apart, 6 minutes after Luostarinen's goal to make it 2-2 after 2. Verhaeghe would score for the first time in like 14 games or something in the third period to make it 3-2, but Panarin would score less than a minute later to tie it up at 3 once again, and we head to overtime where nothing goes. It's a pretty exciting back and forth overtime. In the shootout, Sam Reinhart, Mika Zibanejad, and Artemi Panarin are the goal scorers. You guys can do the math there. It's a 4-3 victory for the Blue Shirts. Bobrovsky, 34 of 37 for a 919. Shesterkin, 27 of 30 for a 900 in the winning effort here. Again, 4-3 in the shootout is the final. The Canucks taking on the Flames, and a really strong effort here from Niels Höglander. He scores the first 2 goals, one in the first, one in the second. Rasmus Andersson would make it a 1-goal game before heading to the third, but JT Miller would score with about 3.5 to go to make it a 3-1 game. Lindholm would net the empty netter to make it 4-1, and Hanley would score his first to make it a 4-2 game and make it a bit more respectable on the scoreboard. But all in all, Vancouver was kind of just the better team tonight. Markstrom, 22 of 25 for an 880. Casey DeSmith, 22 of 24 for a 917. Vancouver kind of just takes care of business in this one, and again, it's a 4-2 final. The Sharks taking on the Blackhawks, and this was the most San Jose Sharks game we've had since they got 10 goals scored on them in back-to-back games earlier in the year. Thomas Bordeleau scores twice in the first to make it 2-0, and then Zetterlund scores twice in the first minute and a half of the second to make it 4-0. But the Blackhawks find a way to come back and win. Ryan Donato and Tyler Johnson scoring twice to make it 4-2 before the third. Seth Jones and Phil Kurashev tie it. Kurashev's goal coming with just 47 seconds to go in the game, and then just 18 seconds into OT, Seth Jones with his second of the game is the game-winning goal here. Not the best night from Devin Cooley, 26 of 31 for an 839. That overtime goal especially, he's probably going to want back. It wasn't a bad shot, but kind of just clean in from the top of the circle, not the best goal to give up. Peter Mrazek was not great either, 26 of 30, but just marginally better, and it's good enough for the win here. Again, both of these teams do not give a damn about the 2 points at this point. They just want Macklin Celebrini, so it is what it is. It's a 5-4 overtime victory for the Blackhawks. The Kings taking on the Lightning, and this was another game that went back and forth pretty entertainingly. Adrian Kempe opens the scoring. Braden Point ties it with just 6 seconds to go in the first. Trevor Moore would make it a 2-1 game in the second, and Mikey Anderson would make it a 3-1 game early on in the third. But Stamkos scores twice in the final 5 minutes of regulation to tie it up. We head to OT, and once again, very early on in overtime, Vlad Gavrikov, 25 seconds in, makes it a 4-3 overtime win for LA, keeping them in third in the division. Tampa Bay staying fourth in the Atlantic despite the extra point here. A big win for LA. Again, they're trying to keep themselves in the gap there above Vegas to maintain that third divisional spot. And of course, Tampa Bay will take the point. They're pretty safely in a playoff spot in the East, but they would have liked the 2 points here. 4-3 in overtime is the final for the Kings. In the final game of the night here, the Golden Knights taking on the Blue Jackets. No surprises in this one. The Blue Jackets get absolutely shelled by Vegas, 47-22, and lose by a final score of 4-2. Eric Goodbranson opens the scoring in the first. Barbashev and Eichel in the second. Dorofeyev and Eichel in the third. And then Meyer adds one more with 12 seconds to go to make it a 4-2 game. Aiden Hill did leave the game in this one with an injury, so we'll see what the timetable is for him there. Daniil Tarasov, 43 of 47. He was very busy, but just not good enough for the win. Of course, they couldn't get more than 2 past Vegas in this one. It's a 4-2 victory. Vegas, again, maintaining their gap over the 2 other teams chasing them down in the wild card, that being St. Louis and Minnesota, and they get that done tonight. So that's it for NHL regular season recap. Night 156, We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. 10 games on a Sunday, a rarity, but we'll take it. Enjoy the night. We'll talk to you guys then.